Welcome to Masterful Visions. I'm your host, Zebediah Barrett. We are back at it again with another classic Wes Anderson film, The Royal Tenenbaums. Today we are traveling back in time a little bit to 2001 when this film was released. The film follows character Royal Tenenbaum, played by Gene Hackman, and the premise of the film is family. A dysfunctional family, yes, but family nonetheless. It follows a story of a father and a mother who debate divorce but choose separation without legalities. Royal is the children's eccentric father who leaves them in their younger years and returns to them after they've grown. He arrives falsely claiming he has a terminal illness and works on reconciling with his 3 children and his ex-wife. Now, Anderson understands that families are imperfect, fragmented, beautiful, inescapable, and all other manners of contradictory things. The Royal Tenenbaums is Anderson's ultimate tribute to family. That being said, ironically, this is not a family film. It has an MPAA rating of R, and it deals with a lot of rough themes that most of my listeners will not want to deal with. My wife and I can appreciate it for the art factor, but it goes against a lot of our religious beliefs. If you're thinking about watching this film, there's a couple things you need to be aware of. There's the inclusion of divorce, suicidal attempts, foul language, brief nudity, and honestly a lot more. I could keep going. These rough topics can cause some really awkward situations depending on who you watch it with, and stir up some emotions you may not want it to. This film is not for everyone, and it's not meant for anyone under the age of 18. That being said, I'd like to start this episode a little bit differently, and before getting into the more technical and director-specific side of things, I think we should talk about the cast. Now, obviously, I've already mentioned the father, Royal Tenenbaum, was played by Gene Hackman. The 3 children are played by Luke Wilson, Ben Stiller, and Gwyneth Paltrow. Supporting actors include Owen Wilson as Luke Wilson's best friend named Eli Cash, Bill Murray as Gwyneth Paltrow's husband Raleigh St. Clair, and Danny Glover plays Henry Sherman, the love interest of Angelica Houston's character Ethelene Tenenbaum. The reason I bring up the cast is because I'm sure you recognized most of those names. And if you did recognize most of those names, you can probably tell just from those names that the acting on this film was phenomenal. I also bring it up because in the case of any film, if the casting's not done right, it can break the film. In this case, Anderson knew what he was trying to accomplish and chose what I believe to be the perfect cast. I also wanted to share something with you. It excited me. I had a fellow podcaster and film buff reach out and ask me if I'd be covering the rule of thirds and specifically Anderson's use of the technique. Now, the reason that excited me is because prior to this conversation, I knew of him, but I'd never met him. I still haven't met him, but it just excites me. Now, it also excites me because never in my wildest dreams would I have expected someone I've never met to reach out to me and talk about the podcast. The fact that he reached out to me got me so excited. I had also already planned on talking about the rule of thirds with this film, so I just decided why not bump the publishing date up a little bit. So if you're listening, Ryan, I appreciate the question, and I really hope you enjoy this episode. Let's talk about that rule of thirds. What is it? Let me try to explain it the easiest way I can. If you're looking at a picture or a painting or watching a movie, I want you to start by shifting your focus on the outer rectangle, the TV frame or the picture frame. Now shift your focus to the inside rectangle. I want you to take that space and divide it perfectly into equal thirds. That's the simplest form of the rule of thirds. A more detailed explanation would be that it's a framing technique that actually forces the audience to shift their visual focus onto one specific area of the screen. This technique's actually used in filmmaking and photography, and it involves dividing the image into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, essentially creating 9 equal parts. Now, the points where the lines intersect are called points of interest. Those are the spots where our eyes are naturally drawn in on an image of any format. Anderson frequently uses the rule of thirds to balance his shots and emphasize certain elements in the frame. For example, in the opening of the film, we see the Tenenbaum house framed by a fence. The house is positioned on the left third of the frame. It might be the right third. It's been a little bit since I've seen it, so forgive me for not getting it correct if it's left or right. But the fence takes up the other 2/3. That composition, though, not only creates a sense of balance, but also draws our attention to the house. And the house is the main subject of that shot. That's where our attention is supposed to be drawn. Another example of the rule of thirds in this movie can be seen where the character Royal Tenenbaum is introduced. He's sitting at the end of a dining table, and the shot's divided into thirds vertically, with Royal in the center of the frame, drawing our attention to him while the dining table takes up the left and the right thirds. That left and the right thirds being filled with that dining table shows us the distance between him and his children, who are at the opposite end of the dining table. That composition emphasizes his character's distant relationship with his children. The rule of thirds is not specific to Anderson or his style. Don't get me wrong. It is everywhere. You can see it all over the place. You just have to look for it. You have to know what you're looking for. Anderson's use of this style kind of creates a sense of balance and harmony in the shots, but it also emphasizes the relationships between characters. Let's move on to briefly talk about color. Yet again, Anderson uses these pastel colors to create a world that is both fantastical and real. In this case, color is also used to differentiate between different time periods in the film. The scenes set in the past are often shot in warm, sepia tones, while the present-day scenes are shot in a cooler, more muted color palette. This contrast in color helps to create a sense of nostalgia for the past and highlight the characters' current struggles. Color is also used to reinforce the characters. Each character in the film is associated with a specific color, which helps convey their personality and emotions. For example, Margot Tenenbaum is often seen wearing a bright red hair clip. This could represent her passionate and rebellious nature. The film's overall color scheme is composed of a range of muted colors such as brown, beige, and gray, which gives that film a nostalgic retro feel. This muted color palette is then punctuated by bright, bold pops of color, as in examples like Margot's red clip. Overall, the use of color in the Royal Tenenbaums is a crucial component of the film's visual storytelling. Anderson's bold use of color helps to create a distinctive and memorable world for the characters to inhabit, and the color symbolism adds depth and complexity to the character personalities. Now let's talk about music. I've briefly touched on it before, but music is so important in the making of movies. Music in film can help establish characters, show plot developments, reflect characters' emotions, and enhance the film's motifs. Music sets the mood and the tone for the entire film. I could list a bunch of movies where music plays a phenomenal role, but we'd be here all day. So how about we just talk about music in Wes Anderson's unique style? His use of music contributes to the overall aesthetic of his films. Royal Tenenbaums is supposedly set in the 70s, so you'll notice that the music is mostly from that 60s and 70s era, giving us a sense of time and transporting the audience to a time when the Tenenbaums were young and hopeful, and older and less hopeful. This adds to the film's overall sense of timelessness and romanticizes the past. The soundtrack of the Royal Tenenbaums has quite the mix of genres also. This eclectic mix of musical genres ranges from rock to classical to Bollywood, and it mirrors the diverse interests of the Tenenbaums family members. This also adds to the film's quirky and unconventional style. Anderson also uses music to establish and develop the characters in the film. For example, the use of Judy is a Punk by the Ramones during Margot's introduction sets the tone for her rebellious and nonconformist personality. Likewise, Richie's obsession with the Rolling Stones is established through his listening to Ruby Tuesday in his tent. All in all, Wes Anderson's use of music in the Royal Tenenbaums adds to the film's overall aesthetic. It creates a sense of nostalgia, reflecting the diverse interests of the characters and developing and establishing the characters' personalities. I hope you enjoyed learning more about the one and only Wes Anderson and his unique and memorable directing style. Stay tuned for our next episode where we will once again be talking about one of Anderson's works. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon on Masterful Visions.